This is Ms. Benson with SanfordFlipMath, and we are doing Algebra 2 using the Springboard textbook. And we're looking at 15.3 section in our textbook, but we're just going to do the first part. We're going to talk about dividing polynomials using long division today. So first of all, we're just going to start with a couple simple numbers, and we're going to divide them using long division. So you may have seen this process done before, maybe not, but we're just going to walk through it here with numbers before we throw in some other variables and stuff. Okay, so when we're asked to find the quotient, that means to basically just divide these two. Okay, that is the answer when we divide, is the quotient. So I'm going to set it up like this. The 12 goes over here. That's what I'm dividing by. And the 387, this part here, is what I'm dividing into. Okay, so those two things go in those places. Now when we set it up like this, what we're trying to find is what times 12 will give us 387. Okay, so we're constantly going to think, what times 12 here? Okay, so if I have, but I'm just first going to start with, let's not start with 387. Let's just start with the first two numbers, because I know 12 can't go into just 3, but 12 does go into 38. So 12 times what gets us to 38? And unfortunately, we don't have anything that fits this question mark specifically. So what do we know that gets us as close as possible to 38 without going over? So I have 12 times 2 equals 24. I can get closer. 12 times 3 gives us our 36. So that's the closest we can get without going over our 38. So once I've decided what I can multiply by, here's my 3. I'm going to put that 3 up here because that is 12. I have my 12 times my 3 gives me 36. Okay, so I'm going to multiply these together. 3 times 12 is 36. And now I'm going to subtract these two. Okay, so 38 minus 36 is 2. Then we need to bring down that 7. Okay, and we're going to do the same process again, this time using our 27 instead of our 38. So now we're thinking again, what times 12? In this case, though, we're talking about our 27. What times 12 gets us as close as possible to 27 without going over? And here, we know that that is 2. 12 times 2 gives us 24. Now we subtract, so we multiply. Now we're subtracting, just like we did before, and we get 3. Now we don't have anything else to bring down. There's nothing left to bring down, so this is as far as we can go because 12 does not go into 3 fully. So this means that we have a remainder. So I'm going to write that next to this up here. I have a remainder of 3 divided by 12 because 12 doesn't go into 3, but that 3 is still being divided by our 12. So the quotient, our answer here, so I'm going to write this as quotient equals 32 and 3/12, so we can reduce that 3/12 to 1/4. Okay, so 32 and 1/4 is our answer here. All right, so now that we've seen that, you've gotten a little bit of a refresher in long division using numbers if you haven't seen them before. Now I'm going to go over and we're going to start using this with variables. All right, now I have this written in the same notation. Now, what I'm dividing by, again, I'm going to set this up like this. What I'm dividing by goes outside. So my x minus 4 goes out here. And then I have my x to the 4th minus 2x cubed minus 15x squared plus 31x minus 12. This polynomial here is what I'm dividing into. Okay, so again, I'm thinking this, what times, what times what gives me this certain variable or this certain number. But instead of doing this whole x minus 4, all I'm going to do is take the front and figure out what times x gives me x to the 4th. So all I'm thinking here is what times x, okay? So what times x gives me x to the 4th? Well, in this case, we have x cubed times x gives me x to the 4th. Now, so that's what's going to go up above in that division box. So since we have that written above, we're going to do the same process again. We're going to multiply what is up there above the bar in our quotient, where our quotient is going to go. So I'm going to multiply, but instead of multiplying by just the fronts like we're dealing with here, I'm going to multiply both parts. Okay, so x cubed times x gives me x to the 4th, and x cubed times negative 4, that is a negative 4, gives me negative 4x cubed. Now, before we subtracted, because it's easy to forget to distribute that negative through here, I'm going to suggest that we do opposite, opposite, then I'm going to add. So I'm going to always remember to, whenever we've multiplied, to take the opposite of both terms, then add. So these two cancel, and we get negative 2x cubed plus 4x cubed. That gives us 2x cubed. All right, so now we've got to do the next term, just like we did before, but we're, again, bringing this term down. So we've got our minus 15x squared that goes here. So again, we're going back to this question over here. What times x? We're taking the front. So what times x gives us 2x cubed? Well, 2x squared. So I write plus 2x squared up here. So 2x squared times my x gives me 2x cubed. And then I'm going to multiply by the second part again. So minus 8x squared. So here we go again. Opposite, add, cancel. Negative 15x squared plus 8x squared gives us 7x squared. All right, now I'm just going to continue the same process here. We're bringing down each of our terms until we can't go any further. Okay, and we're going to continue with the opposite, then add. Okay, so now we have what times x gives us negative 7x squared? Well, that's negative 7x in this case. Negative 7x times x gives us our negative 7x squared. Negative 7x times negative 4 is positive 28x. Opposite, opposite. We add, those two cancel. 31x plus negative 28x gives us 3x. All right, now we're going to keep going again because we can still do something. We have to bring this last term down. That gives us our negative 12 as our last term. But we can still do what times x because we have an x here. Okay, so what times x gives us 3x? Well, that's 3. Okay, so 3 times x is 3x. 3 times negative 4 is negative 12. I'm going to take opposite, opposite. Add negative 3x minus, or 3x plus negative 3x is 0. And then negative 12 plus 12 is 0. So these cancel. So unlike before with our numbers, we don't have a remainder in this case. Okay, so what we get for our quotient is what is up here above the bar. So x cubed plus 2x squared minus 7x plus 3 times x minus 4 gives us this polynomial. And that's what we're doing when we're using this long division. Okay, so we're going to do a couple more examples here, going through the same process. Here's the next one. If you want to take a minute and pause to try it yourself. I know we've only done one example so far, but take a minute to pause so that you can try it out yourself. All right, so let's set this up just like we have before. Now, the one thing to take note of is that this looks like a fraction bar. Well, just like fractions, it means that the numerator is being divided by the denominator. Okay, so this also means division. Just like in fractions, it's another symbol by saying I'm dividing this polynomial here by this. Okay, so we're going to use the same process as before. We've got our negative 2x plus 3 goes on the outside, and we've got underneath the bar, we've got 4x to the fourth power plus 12x cubed. This whole polynomial goes underneath here. This one's a little bit longer than the last one, so we're going to just keep it. So it's going to take us a little bit of time, but we'll get there. Okay. So, and once again, we're just taking the fronts here, and we're saying what times. Now in this case, our front is negative 2x. So what times negative 2x gives us blank, whatever that is. So in this case, what times negative 2x gives us 4x to the fourth power? Now I want a positive 4, so something has to be negative up here first of all. So I know it's going to be a negative 2, and we want x cubed. Because x, remember, we add our exponents when we multiply the same bases together. Okay? So we've got negative 2x cubed. We've got to multiply that by our negative 2x. That gives us our 4x to the fourth power. Negative 2x cubed times 3 gives us negative 12x cubed. Okay, so now we've already done our multiplication, but I'm just going to write in a note over here, multiply to multiply, and then we're going to do opposite, then add. Okay, it's the same thing as subtracting. I mentioned that in the last video, 15.1 and 2, when we were talking about subtracting polynomials. So subtracting something is the same thing as adding a negative. So we've got these will cancel. And this, I know it doesn't look like it, but that is a plus sign. So we're adding, whoops, you know what? I made a mistake, and thank you for all those who were screaming at me for a while. Negative 2x cubed times 3 is 6x cubed. I'm sorry, that's my fault. So when we add those, we don't get 24x, we get 18x cubed. Okay, now we're going to do the same process again. We're bringing down this plus 7x squared, and we're taking, again, what times negative 2x gives us 18x cubed. Well, in this case, we've got negative 2x times, it's got to be a negative again, negative 9x squared. Okay, so that gives us 18x cubed. Negative 9x squared times 3 gives us negative 27x squared. Okay, now here's our opposite then add. That's where that comes in here again. These cancel. 7x squared plus 27x squared gives us 34x squared. All right, here we're bringing down our x again, that next term. Oops, I'm going to write in blue because that yellow is hard to see. Okay, 34x squared plus x. Now we're playing this game again. What times negative 2x gives us 34x squared? Negative 7x is what we need. I'm sorry, that's negative 17x. Sorry, I wrote that. I missed that 17. So negative 17x times negative 2x gives us our 34x squared. Negative 17x times 3 gives us negative 51x. Ooh, these numbers are getting a little big, but that's okay. We can still work on them. Okay, so opposite, add 34x minus 34x squared, or plus negative 34x squared gives us 0, so those cancel out. x plus 51x gives us 52x. All right, and once again, we're bringing down to that last term, that constant. But we can still find something that's negative 2x times what gives us our 52x. So negative 2x times negative 26 is what gives us that 52x. Negative 26 times 3 is negative 78. So we're going to do opposite, opposite, add. Those cancel. 78 plus 6 is 84. Okay, now this is where we come in with what our remainder is. Remember when we did that with our number problem? I'm going to go back a couple slides here. We ended up writing it as whatever the remainder was over whatever what our divisor was. That's what this number is called out here. Okay, so we wrote the remainder over the divisor is how we write that. Okay, so I'm going to go use that same idea back over here. Okay, our remainder was 84. So I'm going to add 84 as our remainder divided by negative 2x plus 3. So that's how we would write our quotient. Now I'm going to write it all together at the bottom so that we can see it all together. We got our quotient is negative 2x cubed minus 9x squared minus 17x minus 26 plus 84 divided by negative 2x plus 3. Whew, I know, these take a little while, but they're kind of fun, aren't they? I know, I just said it was fun, but that's okay. All right, we've got one more example. So again, let's remember this fraction bar means dividing. And set this up, we're using long division, finding the quotient, finding the solution, you know, or finding what we're looking for, okay? And so take a minute to pause, try this yourself, and then come back and see how we do it. All right, so we're setting this up just the same as before. So we've got our divisor here. And then I don't think I told you what this polynomial underneath this bar is called, but it is called the dividend. Just so we get some terminology here straight, because you may see that in the future. Here, let me fix my R here so it's easier to see. Okay, so we're doing our long division just like normal. But is there something, I think there's something missing that we've had before. All of our polynomials underneath this bar here always went in order. We had negative 5x squared. You know what, though? That was completely my bad. This is supposed to be the fifth power. Okay, so that is my bad. I'm going to rewrite that. I'm fixing it in the problem. Okay, so negative 5x to the fifth power minus 2x to the fourth plus, oh, there's nothing to the third power. We don't have a cubed term in here. Okay, well, we still have to include it because we're going to find things that x times something is going to give us an x cubed term, and we want to see if that's part of our division, part of our quotient. We still want to make sure that we include that. So what we need to do is, since we don't have one written here, that means that the coefficient has to be 0, x cubed, because 0 times x cubed is 0. So that's why it's not written in our problem. But we want to make sure that we include it. And you'll see it'll make more sense in a little while, but we don't want to miss one of those terms. Okay, so again, we're playing the game what times x. Okay, so what times x gives us negative 5x to the fifth power? All right, well that's going to be negative 5x to the fourth power. Okay, so this is, we get here, negative 5x to the fourth times negative 2. That gives us plus 10x to the fourth. Opposite, opposite. We add. All right, Now we're going to bring down this 0x cubed. Okay, just because that's what our next step is bringing down the next term. Okay, now what times x gives us negative 12x to the fourth? So that's going to be negative 12x cubed. Okay, so we've got negative 12x cubed times x, negative 12x to the fourth, we got that already, plus 24x cubed. Opposite, opposite, add. Okay, so we end up with negative 24x cubed. Now do you see here that if we didn't have this term, we would have pulled down our x squared term instead. And then we would have been subtracting or adding a negative 24x cubed to an x squared term. And it just gets a little bit messy here. So if you ever find a term missing, just account by it by putting that 0x cubed there. It'll work out eventually, but just so that you don't lose track of those terms, make sure that you include it so that you're not missing something in the end. Okay. So now we can bring down our 32x squared. Okay, and we're going to play what times x gives us negative 24x cubed. Well, that's negative 24x squared. All right, then negative 24x squared times negative 2. That gives us plus 48x squared. All right, opposite, opposite, add. Those cancel. And you should always get these two front terms to cancel. I'm sure you've noticed that as a pattern so far, but make sure that it happens, because otherwise you've done something a little bit wrong. So let's always go back and see what's happened there and what you need to deal with. Okay, so we're adding negative 48x squared plus 32x squared. That gives us negative 16x squared. Okay, now we've got to bring down, I have to go around a couple things. Bring down our negative 48x. All right, what times x gives us negative 16x squared? Here we get negative 16x. We get negative 16x squared. So negative 16x times negative 2. It's our plus 32x. Opposite, opposite, add. These cancel. We get, need a little more space. I don't think that showed up very well, but it's 48x plus negative 48x plus negative 32x. That gives us a negative 80x. All right, and then we've got to bring our last term down, which is hard to see. That's a 32. Okay, so that is going to go here, our plus 32. So now we've got what times x gives us negative 80x. Well, in this case, we've got negative 80. That's all we've got. So negative 80 times x is negative 80x. Negative 80 times negative 2 is positive 160. Okay, now we're going to do opposite, opposite, add. When we add these two together, we get 128. And can x times anything give us 128? No. So here we've gotten as far as we can go. We've gotten to our remainder. So we're remembering that as 128. So we write our remainder up here with our remainder over our divisor, x minus 2. Okay, so I'm going to write this all together off to the side so we can see it. So our quotient, when we divide the polynomials together, or when we divide this polynomial by this one, we get negative 5x to the fourth minus 12x cubed minus 24x squared minus 16x minus 80 plus 128 over x minus 2. And there we are. We found our quotient. So that's what we're looking for. Thank you for watching SanfordFlipMath. I hope you come visit us again. Thanks. Bye.